Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Inside Man United. My name is Rowan Brennan. Thank you very much for joining me once again. And as always, if you like the content and if you can spare a couple of seconds, it'd be great if you'd hit that like and subscribe button. Part 3 today of our 3-part series that I made this week in terms of reviewing the squad, in terms of who do we keep, who do we sell, and who do we buy. You know, having done defense and midfield, it is now time for us to look at United's attack. And I don't expect this to be an overly long episode, given that the numbers at that end of the pitch are smaller. And I think the outgoings are going to be a little bit lower than maybe what is required in the major surgery United will need, both in midfield and in defence. There are still a couple of interesting things that we need to look at with regards to United's attack. So let's get into it. So United's attack is an area that needs a little bit of work as well. Not as much as the midfield and the defence. I still think that United have plenty of talent in those forward positions, both in the first team now and coming through the youth ranks. But there still are some major areas that require attention, none more so than the right-hand side. I mean, it's well documented, and everyone, unless you're living under a rock, should know that the issues United have on that right-hand side are quite clear, with Mason Greenwood now plying his trade in La Liga. There is rumours that he may be coming back, but for this episode, we're going to assume that he will be sold. And there's a lot of rumours saying that he will come back. There are a lot of rumours saying that he will definitely be sold because it's pure FFP profit on him. So it remains to be seen. Facundo Pellistri not really being able to stake a claim despite all the issues that we've experienced on the right-hand side, with Jadon Sancho now having to go to Bundesliga to revive his career, having fallen out with Erik ten Hag. Toney not really performing to the level that we would have expected and bringing his own off-the-field drama into the United fold. Pellistri hasn't really been given a proper opportunity, in my opinion, but it looks like he is surplus to requirements, and is one of the key reasons he was allowed leave was because of the emergence of Omari Forson, with those at United believing Omari Forson to be a far more prodigious talent than Facundo Pellistri threatens to be. So that right-hand side is where a lot of attention will need to go, because as things stand, we have no one on that right-hand side. Mason Greenwood gone, Sancho gone, Toney 100% must be sold. And Omari Forson not really impressing on what we've seen so far this season, but he is a young lad and, you know, let's take it easy on him. In terms of Jadon Sancho, I think it's quite clear that we need to sell him. Clearly, we're going to be taking a loss, but he is hopefully the last of a profile of player that I believe United have been far too attracted to, that they need to rid themselves of. Whether it's Paul Pogba, Jesse Lingard, Anthony Martial, and now Jadon Sancho, and I would also put Marcus Rashford in that bracket as well. It's a profile of very precocious, egotistical, hugely talented players that seem to think they are bigger and better than the club and don't seem to have the right mentality, either in terms of their application to the job or in their ability to adapt to the rigors and demands of what a United player actually should be, mentality-wise and output-wise in terms of performance. Jadon Sancho, with all the best numbers that you can imagine from a player coming from an overseas league, it just hasn't worked. And I was skeptical. It's all well and good saying this in hindsight, but even at the time when we were being linked with Jadon Sancho, I wasn't super buzzed for it because I don't trust Dortmund. I don't trust the Bundesliga. I never have, and I never will. We've been burnt numerous times, not only by that league, but by that club specifically. And other top flight clubs have been burnt by imports from Germany, namely Chelsea with Kai Havertz and Timo Werner. And there's other players that just haven't cut mustard who, you know, even Serge Gnabry, who could not cut it at Arsenal and goes over and becomes one of the, you know, main attacking outlets at Bayern Munich. Again, just like Serie A, Bundesliga is way behind the Premier League. And when you're getting players that are rising to the top of the Bundesliga, it is still a massive punt on whether or not they're going to work in the Premier League. Jadon Sancho is a player that would have the world at his feet if he wanted, but he just doesn't have the mentality required to cut it at United, and we will sell him, and we should be able to get anywhere between 40 and 50 million for him from whichever club is willing to pay it. I still think he does have a future. He clearly has talent, and maybe another club thinks they can eke it out of him. However, things are not going especially well at Dortmund at the moment. He has, I believe, 1 assist, a bunch of missed opportunities, and not playing particularly well. Which doesn't bode well for the price tag we'd be hoping to get in the summer. Facundo Pellistri, I think it's quite clear that there won't be a future for him at the club, so we will be selling him. Maybe we can get 10 to 15 million in for him, depending on how well his loan spell in Spain goes. Anthony is the big issue here, where we're going to take a massive financial hit on him. And to be honest, for a player that was scouted and valued at around the 25 to 30 million mark, how and why United ended up paying 89 million for that player is frankly beyond me. Is that because of Ten Hag pushing for the transfer? Is it an outrageous lack of negotiating power and ability by the team that eventually brokered that deal? Who knows? And effectively, who cares? What's done is done, and we need to right that wrong. The problem for Ten Hag here is that apparently Ineos are quite committed to getting rid of Anthony, but Ten Hag seems to have an outrageous amount of faith in him and thinks that he can come good. Whether that's true or whether it's born out of an idea of wanting to be proven right on a purchase that has gone so magnificently wrong, I don't know whether it's Ten Hag's own hubris or a genuine belief in the player that he thinks it's going to, turn it around over the next season or two. What is universally accepted by all United fans and everyone looking at the club bar Ten Hag is that Anthony is simply not good enough and needs to be sold. And whatever we get for him, we should just take and run. He is an ineffective, predictable, one-dimensional player that will offer nothing to any sort of a team that's looking to challenge for the top honours, both domestically and in Europe. So what do we do? Bruno Fernandes, of course, can play out there when required, but it's not his best position. And you need someone that's a little bit more direct, someone who's able to take on and beat players and dribble past them, which is not something Bruno can do. The main players that you'd be looking at this position would be Federico Chiesa from Juventus. Juventus are obviously doing a lot better now than they have been in the last couple of years under Max Allegri. And Federico Chiesa, I think, is quite happy to stay in Italy, as a lot of Italian players are. They follow a very similar profile to German players, where they like to play in Germany. And it would be difficult to get Federico Chiesa from Juventus, but I do think he would be a player that would match the kind of profile that we would like to bring into the club with the right attacking output. With regards the other options around Europe, I don't know if there's a huge amount that we could and should be looking at. I mean, most of the talent that we need to be keeping an eye on is in the Premier League, but that does come at a price. Players that we've been linked with are Michael Olise, French wide player, although he's played most of his career in England. A very big talent, seems to be really coming into his own, but does have hamstring issues. And is he going to be providing the same kind of injury worries to the team that other players have this season? It's a big risk. 2 hamstring injuries in a single year for a man of his age is quite worrisome. However, he's still young enough to be able to recover from those injuries, and it does seem Michael Olise is top of the pile. A player I really like, and someone that I think United should be looking at, and I think could be a little bit more affordable and, in my opinion, a more proven talent, is Jared Bowen. I think he's a fantastic player. I think when United are going to be dealing with West Ham with regards McTominay and Maguire, I think that Mohamed Kudus or Jared Bowen needs to be in the discussion, and there should be some sort of a swap involving these players that I think United can benefit from. So Jared Bowen is a player that I really, really like. I think he has done far more in terms of goal scoring than Olise has over a longer amount of time. And he doesn't have the same injury record as Olise has accrued this year. So Jared Bowen, Michael Olise and Federico Chiesa are the 3 players that I would be most interested in on that right-hand side. However, we could end up seeing Mason Greenwood there next year, which, I think a lot of fans would be happy to see him back. I think a lot of fans would not be happy to see him back. It would be a very divisive transfer, but it is very possible because he does provide an option up front, and he does provide an option out wide. And if there's one thing United have needed this year, it's players who can play multiple positions. And we have stretched our squad's capabilities beyond breaking point in terms of having players play out of position. Mason Mount is a right-footed player, we need to remember, and while inverting wingers is the kind of, fashionable play these days, Mason Mount is a wide attacking player and he is right-footed. And he has been experimented with out in the right-hand side at United, and I thought it worked reasonably okay. So I do think that right-hand side could be filled with Mason Mount when he is fit, because I don't see him taking over the left-hand side from Marcus Rashford if he stays. Alejandro Garnacho might be used out wide. He might be only used out right because we don't have anyone else out there. And of course, there is Alejandro Garnacho, who has started a majority of his games this season on that side. So I think it's worth kind of remembering that, Garnacho is maybe going to be the long-term option on the right-hand side. So we'll see what happens out there. On to the area of Marcus Rashford. Now, Marcus Rashford, while a very strong talent, he has promised so much and, in my opinion, delivered very little. This is his 9th season at the club, and in only 4 of his 9 seasons has he scored in double figures. 2 of those have been 11 and 10 goals. The other 2 seasons being 17 goals, one being last season, and the other 17 goals being 4 seasons before that. His assists are not great. He's not really much of a provider. He is a guy that likes to take on the ball and score himself, despite the fact that he's not a striker, doesn't want to play as a striker, wants to play as a wide player, but wants to take all the shots and doesn't really assist a huge amount. He is a problematic player for a variety of reasons. He just simply isn't producing often enough, consistently enough, and when he's not scoring goals, he doesn't do a whole lot else. He doesn't do a lot defensively. He doesn't track back. The footage of him, waltzing around the pitch around Ross Barkley was damning, even though other people thought that was grossly unfair. It's not unfair. There's video evidence of him strolling around a player with the ball. Marcus Rashford, if he doesn't have the ball at his feet, isn't interested. And he'll make efforts, but he pulls out of 50-50s. I implore everyone looking at this video, anytime you see Marcus Rashford playing from now until the end of the season, look at what he does when he doesn't have the ball and look at what he does when he's challenging for a 50-50. He never wins a 50-50. He pulls out of everything. He is terrified of going shoulder to shoulder and mixing it up with players to try and win a ball. He will do as much as is required to make it look like he's trying without actually being effective. People might think that's unfair. I don't. I believe the evidence of my eyes, and that's the story I'm sticking to. His output this season has been atrocious. His work off the ball has been poor. And after 9 seasons, I think the return that we've seen from him has not been even close to what it should be. As someone who is the top earner at the club at 350 grand per week, and someone who would give us pure FFP profit, as someone who has come through the youth ranks, I think the opportunity that we have in selling a player like him is massive. Between the transfer fee and what we'd be saving in wages, that is worth about 150 million to the club. And I don't think Marcus Rashford has done anything close, either this season or throughout his entire career at United, to make that even a tough decision. It's unfortunate. I have nothing against the guy. I wish him all the best. I think his work off the pitch and what he's done, and, stuck 2 fingers up to the government and shown what can be done if people actually try and give a shit about those less fortunate, is commendable. But unfortunately, that doesn't translate to goals and assists on the pitch, which as a United fan is what I'm most concerned with. It's a shame, but Marcus Rashford, in my opinion, has no future at Manchester United, and when has been relied upon to be the main man, has too often failed that audition, and was asked to be the captain by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer when he was coach and refused. Now, maybe that was humility in thinking that he wasn't ready, or he just didn't feel he had the mentality to take on that responsibility. In my opinion, a big-time player would take on that responsibility at any age and would relish the opportunity, as opposed to, well, essentially shitting their jocks and saying no. I don't believe it's humility. I believe it's fear. And for me, Marcus Rashford is absolutely surplus to requirements. So for me, in my ideal world, I would have Jared Bowen on the right and maybe Garnacho on the left. Otherwise, maybe we could have Mason Mount on the left-hand side and Garnacho on the right. We do have options in those wide areas with the personnel that we have, with Omari Forson emerging as well. I do think that we have decent options there. But a dedicated right-sided winger, an attacker, does seem to be top priority for the club, with Michael Olise being the kind of the number one name being linked. And I wouldn't have a problem with Michael Olise, but I would like to see more from him consistently, other than what I've just seen this year. Last year, 2 goals, 11 assists. Very, very good. This year, he's trained on even more. And hopefully, if that trajectory continues the way it has, the way it has been this year before his injuries, I think it would be a great transfer. Now, in this forward line, this is where the biggest decisions need to be made, primarily because Rasmus Hojlund has now established himself as a guy that can take on that mantle full-time as a starting striker. I don't think that was even the plan when he was being looked at originally. I think Anthony Martial, pre-injury, was going to be rotating with him a lot more often than he has, due to him being injured yet again and being surplus to requirements. It's obvious he's going to be gone at the end of the season, and it's not really a player I think needs to be discussed in this episode. It's quite clear what's going to happen. Anthony Martial, he's just going to fade away into obscurity in some, league somewhere, whether it's in Turkey or Portugal or Germany or somewhere. But his career is essentially over. The type of profile of player, the profile of player that we need to bring in as a supplemental striker is a very tough one, because we have a young man who's starting to find form, who will be expecting to start, yet he does need backup. Yet we're a club with big ambitions, so need to have a backup striker that our young guy can learn from, but who's also willing to take a back seat and teach from the sidelines as opposed to on the pitch. In my ideal world, the player I would have is Ollie Watkins. I would have him over Ivan Toney. I think Ivan Toney is a fine player and probably more available and would probably be more affordable. But for me, Ollie Watkins is the best English striker in the league and the best striker in the league behind Erling Haaland. I think it would be very difficult to get him from Aston Villa, particularly given the success that they are having. They're probably going to finish in the top 4 and will want to play in Europe next year with Villa, as opposed to playing for Manchester United and most likely being in the Europa League at best. I think top 4 is a pipe dream for United now, and is wholly unrealistic, and will also have a massive impact on the type of striker we can attract. Other names in the mix is Joshua Zirkzee from Bologna, a good striker, did ply his trade with Bayern Munich before he left for Italy. A good player, but again, I don't trust performance in Serie A. I just don't. That's not to say every player in Serie A can't cut it in the Premier League, but it is a far bigger risk than buying someone from, say, La Liga. I don't have much of an opinion on Joshua Zirkzee. All I know is that we've been very strongly linked with him. He is young. He seems to be a very good talent. But is he the type of striker that's going to come in and play second fiddle to Hojlund? Are they going to rotate well? That's another question. Ollie Watkins, if he comes in, will start. He doesn't get injured. His injury record is fantastic. And would Hojlund be happy to play second fiddle to Ollie Watkins? I would hope so. Ollie Watkins is 28 now. I think you get 4 good years out of him as a top level striker. That's enough time to get Rasmus Hojlund into his kind of early mid-20s, and then he can take that mantle himself, and we make adjustments when it's required. The other striker that I think would be good would be Callum Wilson. I know some people laughed at those links because he's injury prone, but Callum Wilson is at the right age profile and has the right ability to come into a club like Manchester United, play second fiddle, because he does have so many injury worries. You're not going to play him more than 35, 40 games a season, but I think he's a great player to either start a game with, take off after 60 minutes and then bring on Hojlund, or vice versa. He's not going to get a move to a bigger club than Manchester United given his age and his injury record, but when he is fit, he's got one of the best goals to games ratio of any striker in the league. The only issue, of course, is injuries. However, when you're going to have a top level striker on the bench, you will need someone that will have the right mindset to understand that is why they're there. And I think Callum Wilson fits that mold very, very well. If he's not playing too many games, you can wrap him in cotton wool. You can make sure he's prepared from the bench to come on, play half an hour every other game, come on and play full games in cup competitions and the odd league game when the tactics require it. And I think would be a fabulous person for Rasmus Hojlund to learn off of, and would be supremely affordable and allow us to put the tight transfer kitty that we have into the wide area, centre back and full back positions, and maybe a couple of midfielders as well. To me, Callum Wilson is the perfect fit. Ollie Watkins is the ideal candidate, and then maybe Michael Olise, Jared Bowen for that wide area, with Mason Mount, Garnacho being able to rotate their duties on the left hand side. So what are your thoughts? Would you keep Rashford? Do you think it's time to cash in and get some money together that we can reinvest in other areas of the squad that need it badly? Garnacho, would you play him on the left? Would you play him on the right? He seems to be doing pretty well on that right-hand side. So do we need to find another player for the left? Is that going to be Mason Mount? But it does look like we're going to get Michael Olise on the right-hand side. So it's there's a lot of unknowns when it comes to that forward line, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing what this club is going to do all across the pitch, because one thing is for certain, wholesale changes are needed. In the words of Ralph Rangnick, surgery of the open heart is going to be required at this club over the summer. Maybe Eric Ten Hag is going to get a chance to oversee that change and get a fully fit squad with which he can compete with next year. But what do you think? Thoughts in the comments. As always, thank you very, very much for joining me. Hit that like button, hit subscribe. That is the final part of my squad review. And I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Take care.